Hello, everybody. My name is Professor Paul Miller, and I am here with a special edition of the Nightly News Presents podcast. Today, we are going to be focused on the growth and potential issues that have happened in the WNBA over the past couple of years. Today, we are being joined by Lady Knights basketball player Diamond Whitaker. Diamond, it's such a pleasure to have you on to talk today about the WNBA, and certainly we wish you the best of luck in your basketball season. We're looking forward to covering some more games for you in the winter term. So thank you so much for joining us today.
You're welcome.
All right, we're also being joined by Hannah Pasquarella, and Hannah is one of our corporate communication students here at Central Penn College, and she is also part of our sports broadcasting team that we have started covering games. Of course, there's a lot more games coming up second half of this season here, but Hannah, thank you so much for joining us today and helping to lead this charge on this podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I mean, this has been a big change in women's sports, and I think it needs to be covered.
Well, there's no question about it. And where do we want to start is at the top. So certainly the WNBA has been a major sports league for many years now. And part of what we're going to be talking about today is some of the major changes that have come along with the WNBA and the growth that they've experienced. One of the things that I kind of wanted to start off with is really just taking a look back at this growth. In fact, and this is from a WNBA press release that I will put along with this that says that viewership attracted an all-time record of 54 million unique views across multiple networks. A record 22 regular season telecasts average at least 1 million viewers, and this basically saw a 170% increase in viewership over the last 10 years or so. Attendance was up 48% last season, and the league had 154 sellouts that marked a 242% increase from the season prior. This is amazing growth in just one season. So one of the things that I kind of wanted to start off with was sort of back to a conversation we were having off air. Diamond, one of the things that we just got done talking about is part of the reason for the WNBA's growth are some of these stars that were created at the college level. One of the things that you said is that you follow maybe not as much WNBA, but you follow the college women's basketball game. So tell me, would you say that your viewership or interest in women's college basketball has increased over the past couple of years?
Yes, because most people play basketball. A lot of people start younger, and a lot of these stars, like, they practice every day, a couple hours a day, 3-4 practices a day for them to become basically a star and for them to get their name out there. They transfer it over to when they end up playing in the WNBA.
Now, let me ask you, one of the questions that I have a lot for our athletes here at Central Penn is, do you have a goal long-term of potentially playing professionally once you're completed here at Central Penn?
If it takes me there, then yes.
Of course. I'm sure anybody would be happy to play professionally if that's the way that the cards turn out. But now, one more question before I go over to Hannah. Do you look up to some of these athletes? Or do they inspire, did they motivate you to be better? Is that part of the reason that you enjoy watching the college game?
Yes, because most of these players have confidence and they just make the game look fun.
And so that's something that you appreciate and maybe part of the reason that you have continued to play even at this next level in college.
Yes.
I appreciate that. Well, Hannah, one of the things that I wanted to kind of talk with you about is, first of all, what was your interest in this topic? Why was this something that you wanted to spend time not only researching, but being a part of this podcast?
Well, I mean, it's not just basketball that really lacks women viewership. It's a lot of different sports. I mean, there's swimming, and then there's the women's soccer team who's, I hate to say, a little bit better than the men's, and they still don't get paid as much or get higher viewership than the men's do. So talking about something as big as this, like the players opting out, it could be so beneficial for future players and the now players.
Well, and I think that's a really important point, and that's kind of the reason why we came all here together today, is to kind of analyze why this happened in a year with massive, massive growth. Why did these players end up opting out? Of course, we'll talk about that in our next segment. But I want to go back to something that we'd all kind of mentioned to this point. The growth in the WNBA, I would imagine, doesn't happen to the extent that it has if it wasn't for two major stars who came out, number one being Angel Reese, number two being Caitlin Clark. They have really established themselves as some of the best college athletes, regardless of gender, of their modern day. And so I'm curious, Diamond, how much you followed those two players, and if those two players helped to maybe bring some of that viewership to the WNBA in their first seasons in the league.
I more so followed Angel Reese because she's a hardworking player on the court. Like, she hustles. Like, she can play both ends of the floor. Basically, if I follow something like that, I can potentially get better in the future. And
in a way, I hope to say that the way that she plays, and you already kind of answered this question, but inspires you. Maybe you can even learn from watching her play. I mean, I know that just from the broadcasts that we do, many of the athletes who are on our Central Penn teams often go back and review the footage to try to improve. I would also argue that there's a way for you to watch people who are really, really good at their sport and their craft and help that, can inspire you, but also help give you some additional skills. Maybe you see how she, does one particular thing, or how she takes a free throw or whatever, and you might be able to implement that in your own game. Would you say that you've ever done that? Maybe not necessarily from Angel Reese, but from any players?
Not really. Like, if I feel like I'm doing something wrong or I played in a game, I can go back and look at that footage and just learn from my own mistakes and to get better and just keep going.
That's all you can do. So let me ask you, Hannah, what is your experience with women's basketball, be it college or professionally? Like, what was it about this? And I appreciate what you said earlier, but on a personal level, what has your experience been with watching these or really kind of being involved with either college or professional women's basketball?
Well, I definitely say that I'm more involved with the college basketball aspect just because part of the class for sports broadcasting is what really got me into basketball. And then my past school, Bloomsburg, I also did basketball live streams. So kind of that aspect. And before that, I really wasn't involved in sports. And then when I got into it, it's different every game. There's a different report on every single game, so it's not the same. And that's what I love the most about it because I hate repetition.
Of course. Did you ever play any sports?
I swam and I ran, so nothing super intense.
But I would also say, because of your experiences playing sports, you can at least understand the competitive aspect of a different sport, even if it wasn't a sport that you're, really knowledgeable about. But let me ask you this. Would you say that this experience has kind of woken you up to some of the inequities in major athletics, be it college or professional?
Oh, for sure. With this project and the lectures that we've previously talked about, the treatment that some sports get versus others, or some genders versus others, is insane and not talked about enough. By bringing awareness to this, I hope that a lot of people can resonate with it and move forward to make a change, or even more complain about it.
Well, there's no question about that. Well, I do want to just sort of, bring this all together here. What we're talking about today is not only just the growth of the WNBA, but how it affects the players. And a major news item is the opting out of the Players Association from the collective bargaining agreement. So we will be right back in just a minute to talk a little bit more about this opt-out and talk about what some of the impacts are in professional women's basketball. So stay tuned.
Hi, this is Brian Christiana. Thank you for listening to the Nightly News Podcast, a part of the Nightly News Media Club here at Central Penn College.
All right, we are back with our Nightly News Presents podcast. We're here with Lady Knights star player Diamond Whitaker. Diamond, welcome to the podcast again. Thank you so much for being here. And of course, Nightly News reporter Hannah Pasquarella, talking a little bit more now about the WNBA players and their opting out of their deal. So again, we talked earlier in our first segment about some of the gains that the WNBA has made from a massive increase in viewership. A massive increase in attendance led to sort of one of the catalysts of this. And that catalyst is the $2.2 billion media rights deal that was signed in July by the WNBA. In this media rights deal, it was an 11-year deal with partnerships with Disney, Amazon Prime, and NBC Universal. But the article on ESPN that we're referring to today says that future agreements could reach this to almost $3 billion over the next 11 years. And so this has been the catalyst to this opt-out. So earlier this season, the players opted out of their collective bargaining agreement that kind of talks about how players are paid, what benefits they receive. The first question a lot of people have is, why did the WNBA players opt out? So I'm going to go over to you, Hannah, because this is something that you have been really spending a lot of time with. What was it that the WNBA players, or what is it that they're looking to gain?
Obviously, some more money, just based on how high their viewership has gotten within the last year. I hate saying little things, but like simple things like better practice facilities and better travel to these games outside of their state, and even supporting players with children. They need more support than others sometimes, and the company needs to be able to give those to the players.
Yeah, I mean, it's not just a financial issue here. It's more about some of the fringe benefits that come along with being a professional athlete. Up until this point, salaries were very, very low. And with this massive increase in money coming in, it only makes sense that the players get a raise. But an important note, and you made this point earlier, of course, in terms of gender equity, it's fair to say that we believe that athletes of any gender deserve to be paid a fair wage. I don't think anybody, at least initially, disagrees with that. But the why do women's, let's just keep it to basketball. Why do women basketball players professionally make much, much less money than men? Well, it's simply a financial component. There's more games in the NBA, larger crowds, much larger media rights deals. It's not necessarily, at least on the surface, and this is what the leagues would tell you, it's not a gender issue. It's a business issue. The more money comes in, more people can be paid. But with that being said, this massive deal, of course, the WNBA players should be trying to make more money. So, Diamond, in your perspective, what is it as a player beyond money? Okay, we get that money is going to change hands here, right? We understand that the players are going to make more money. As a basketball player, what are some of the things that you might be interested in if you would play professionally? What might be some of those things other than money that you would think would not only elevate your game, but be something that you would stand up for in terms of, if you were a part of a players union like that?
From my opinion, better uniform, because a lot of times, like from my perspective, men's uniforms are way better than what women's uniforms are. And a lot of times it's because men's basketball have more money to cover the uniforms, whereas when it comes to female basketball, we don't have that much money put together and to get the same thing that the men's get. And sometimes it can cause us to lose motivation for the sport.
That's really interesting. That's something that I hadn't really ever thought about before, is that, we look good, we feel good, and if we think that maybe our male counterparts aren't, we're not playing on a level playing field, that might impact the way that we, go into our practices, our routines, being in the games, those types of things, which I think is really interesting. I appreciate you bringing that up. So, Hannah, what are some of the major issues at play here when it comes to this opt-out? What are some of the things that the Players Association is looking for?
Yeah, so a comment from the WNBA president, she really went deep into this and claiming that it's not all about the money, which we had previously talked about. She thinks it's about claiming the rightful share of the business as a whole, because we know that the NBA owns part of the WNBA. It's also about improving the work conditions, not just the facilities, but how they're treated off the court and inside of the court. It's more about securing a good future for the next generation and generations after that. And of course, the players playing right now.
Well, and one thing I do want to point out is essentially their opt-out allows them a year of negotiation. So I don't want anybody out there to think that they have gone on strike. Now, if a year from now, if they've still opted out and they don't have a collective bargaining agreement, then yes, there could be a player strike. But as we've talked about in class, Hannah, it makes no sense whatsoever for the WNBA not to have an agreement in place, because they are as popular now as they ever have been. And anybody who's a sports fan will tell you, anytime that a league has either a lockout, which is when the owners do not allow the players to play, or a strike where the players refuse to play based on the agreement that they have in place, significant amount of fans go away from the game. You can look back to the strike in baseball of 1994. Millions of fans went away from the game. So it makes no sense whatsoever for the WNBA to not be a part of making this a positive working conditions for the players. Now, the question is, there was another aspect here that I wanted to bring up as well, and that was that currently the WNBA is under what is called a hard salary cap, meaning that there is a number and that the teams cannot spend above a certain number. What the players are asking for is a soft cap, which means that there is now a minimum amount of money that a team must spend, but not necessarily a maximum. It's similar. Baseball doesn't have any cap at all, so there isn't a minimum, but there is what's called a luxury tax, meaning if you spend above a certain amount, that does have impacts on you. And that was one of the things that we read, is that there was some impacts. If you spend a lot of money, you might have some issues in free agency going forward. But at least this is something that can help to elevate the salaries of these individuals. But again, as Diamond mentioned, it's not just always about the money. I mean, obviously that's a big part of it, and I'm sure with the money coming in, those things will be addressed and hopefully everyone can get on the same page. But as Hannah also mentioned, it's things like travel. So instead of maybe riding on the bus, they get a charter plane. Maybe it's improved practice facilities. Maybe it's even just support to future or potential parents of children. Which is something I would imagine that women have a significant issue with, becoming mothers, because of their demanding athletic schedule. I mean, I can only just imagine, Diamond, how much time that you put into preparing for play each week. I mean, if you had to take a guess between travel and practice and games, how many hours would you say that you spend a week with basketball?
I spend most of my weekend with basketball.
Most of your weekend. And is that just traveling to games, or is that practice as well?
Practices and traveling.
Oh, I'm not even bringing into consideration working out in the gym, weightlifting, cardio. I mean, just if you had to just take a guess in a week, how many hours a week would you say that you are committed to doing any of those things? Travel, practice, playing in games, going to the gym?
I don't know. It's just a lot of hours. In the gym, practicing, going to games. So,
and you're a student as well, of course. But imagine trying to do that and trying to start a family as well. Like, that's got to be something that notoriously has been difficult for female athletes for basically since the beginning of time, right? So I think that's certainly something that's interesting to think about. Well, I do think that it is important that we do understand that, number one, they do have another year to come together on some type of collective bargaining agreement. And again, as I mentioned earlier, it makes no sense whatsoever for these two sides not to come to an agreement. Although, the women also understand that this is for the future of the industry, which is what we're going to come back and talk about here in just a moment. So stay tuned. We'll be right back with Nightly News Presents and our discussion on the WNBA.
This is Dalton Kohler, co-president of Nightly News Media Club and broadcaster for the basketball games. You are listening to the Nightly News Podcast.
Welcome back to the Nightly News Presents. Today we are here with Diamond Whitaker and Hannah Pasquarella, and we are talking about the growth of women's college basketball. First, we talked a little bit more about the season that was, and then in the last segment, we talked a little bit more about the players opting out. And now we're going to take a quick look at the future of women's basketball, not only at the college ranks, but in the professional ranks as well. Well, yes, we did talk about the opt-out, but what we didn't necessarily talk about is some other major news that has come along with the fantastic season that was, and that is expansion. Currently, there are only 13 teams, but recently, Golden State franchise had their expansion draft. They will be playing next season in 2025, as well as an unnamed Toronto and Portland franchise, which are supposed to begin league play in 2026. So one of the things that we can certainly say is more teams, more jobs for professional women's athletics. The more teams there are, the more players there are, the more people who might get an opportunity. And Diamond, this goes back to something that you were saying, if you would ever have the opportunity to play in women's college basketball, you would certainly welcome that opportunity. What does it mean to you with all of these sports organizations, not only just the WNBA, but other opportunities all around the globe? What does that mean for somebody like you who does have that goal down the line of playing professionally?
If I can see that other teams are coming along, I feel like I have more of an opportunity to play at the next level, because the more opportunities there are the better for me and other female athletes that got the same goals as me.
And I think that's 100% accurate. So while a few years ago, maybe there weren't quite as many opportunities, and some people might just be happy with just playing at the college level and then moving into their career. But the more eyeballs that are brought to women's college basketball, to the WNBA, and just women's basketball as a whole, increases the number of people who can see that as a potential career path, right? And that's what I think is so unique about all of this, is that it may change the perspective of all the way down to sort of juniors, right? To really just give that extra, because they know that there are going to be more opportunities for them in the future. So I think that is extremely well said, and I appreciate that very much. From a more of a reporting standpoint, what do you see in the benefits of, from a reporting and a sports broadcasting perspective, what are some of the advantages to the expansion of both the college and the professional women's basketball game?
Myself included, a lot of people know that sports reporting and reporting in general is super competitive, and it's getting more competitive as teams get better and things expand. So with the expansion of women's basketball teams, it gives more opportunity for reporters to report on that team instead of seeing the same reporters over and over again. It gives different perspective, different mindset on the game in general, and just more viewership.
One thing that I would point out here, and this is specific to all of us are involved in what I'm about to say here. We have been doing athletics here at Central Penn as part of the Nightly News for 8 years now. And a decade ago, you wouldn't have had these opportunities. You may not, Diamond, have had the opportunity to, have game film to review, or even to package together for a professional team. In fact, some of the folks who have gone professional from Central Penn have used the footage to edit together a reel that they're able to send. So again, it's this idea that a high tide raises all boats, meaning that the more eyeballs there are on something, the better it's going to be for everyone, not just the players, but the reporters, the writers, the people who are covering these teams. So whereas even a year ago, 2 years ago, maybe there wasn't as many opportunities for a reporter. Maybe there weren't as many opportunities for a player. Now, because of the growth of the college game, which has led to a growth in the professional game, you're now seeing more opportunity for people like you who are either wanting to report on the game or play in the game. And so that, to me, is the biggest benefit of all of this, is that each of you in your own way has found something that you appreciate, enjoy, and are passionate about. And now maybe there's a much more likely opportunity of a career path in this area. Would you say that that's true?
Yes.
Now, would you say that, and again, I know that you're new to the team this year. Would you say that some of your colleagues, your teammates, that they want to play professionally?
I mean, from what I see, yeah, because I can see that they really enjoy playing basketball, and some of them, well, all of them are passionate about the sport because that's why they're on the team.
And I love that. I mean, I can just tell your passion just by being here, and I appreciate that. And I hope that all of this is going to, in some way, give you additional opportunities to continue with your passion in the future. Hey, Hannah, same question. Do you envision this change in not only just with women's basketball, but maybe what has happened with women's basketball changes other women's sports? Maybe the Professional Women's Soccer League gains momentum. Maybe, leagues in other areas gain momentum and viewership and just general interest. Do you think that ultimately this could have some type of impact on your future career?
I hope so, to be honest. I mean, it's been years since we've been hearing about how the U.S. Women's soccer team has been treated and how long they've been trying to fight for better things and better opportunities for the next generation. I think if more teams and more expansion goes along in the sports industry, I think it could be huge for reporters. More things to report on in general, not just about the game, but maybe just about the team and how they've gotten from point A to point B.
And I would argue, too, part of all of this is opportunity. What you're starting to see now with the proliferation of streaming services and even just things like we're doing here, just streaming to YouTube, is providing people with opportunity to get experience and to break into what used to be and still is a really tough industry to break into. And so just a couple things, Hannah, we kind of talked about this off air a little bit. First of all, a couple of more things just to add in addition to the 3 new franchises is that the WNBA is now going to a 44-game regular season, and their playoff series are moving from a 5-game to a 7-game. So again, there are going to be more games, which means more revenue at the gate, which means more revenue from, broadcast rights. But the one thing I do want to add, and this is something that we'll kind of leave with here, is that the biggest thing that the players want is a bigger piece of the revenue pie. You'd mentioned off air that they were getting less than 10% of the revenue. Talk to me a little bit about that and then what their end goals are.
I mean, for them being the main reason why this franchise even makes revenue, it's kind of disappointing that they're getting less than 10%. For them opting out, their goal is to get as close to 50% as they can, which I think is rightfully so. I mean, these players made the WNBA go from little to something real big, and even bigger in the following years. So it only seems right that they would get more revenue just like men's basketball players do, because they're the whole reason why they get viewers.
And I think that's absolutely true. And, we can sort of end with this. This is all a cycle. The fact that women's college basketball has seen such massive improvements has led to the WNBA seeing massive improvements, which then in turn is probably going to continue to feed women's college basketball. Maybe more money can be raised there as well for the schools and in NIL money, which of course we didn't even get to talk about in this podcast, which hopefully will then lead to a better professional product as well. And maybe in a situation when in another 5 to 10 years, when it comes time to renegotiate the collective bargaining agreement, the players in the WNBA can continue getting that bigger piece of the pie. Well, Diamond, Hannah, I think this has been a wonderful discussion about the current state of the WNBA. Diamond, first, I want to thank you so much, not only just for sharing your own opinions, but for everything that you do as far as being a Lady Knight. We know that it's difficult to be a college athlete and, play at your very best. And I just want to thank you for all of your time here today and all of your efforts as being a student athlete.
You're welcome.
And certainly appreciate your time. And Hannah, thank you so much, not only for taking an interest in this, but for helping to organize this whole podcast. I think this was really eye-opening and certainly newsworthy on a very important topic of gender in, not only just college athletics, but professional athletics too. Any parting thoughts that you have about your experience with learning more about this as you researched for the podcast?
I know that the next agreement is in a few months, but hopefully they come to a decision where it's good for all around, even the business and the players. I mean, we would hate for something so big now to just fall to the ground, but...
Yeah, and I mean, I think that's a really important point here. The WNBA is at a crossroads, and while I understand financial sense, I also understand that they are so hot right now that if anything bad happens, that could significantly impact the future of this game. So let's hope that the Players Association and the ownership comes together on an equitable deal for these players. All right, well, thank you so much, everybody, for checking in with us today. I want to again thank Diamond Whitaker and Hannah Pasquarella for helping put together this podcast today. But until next time, thank you for listening to the Nightly News Presents and our discussion on college and professional women's basketball. Until next time.